Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our talks today. Today, we're joined by the wonderful executive producer and showrunner of Apple TV's The Morning Show, Kerry Ehrin. And I actually wanted to start by talking about how you looked towards the finale of the first season, which was so explosive with so many open threads narratively, and the way that that's fed into the second season, because I thought what was really interesting about it is the fact that we don't pick up in the immediate aftermath, and we don't necessarily know all the details of what happened in that immediate aftermath straight away. It's something where you've really sprinkled those details and brought them into play for emotional arcs for characters throughout each episode in the season. And so what was that journey of realizing that that was how you wanted us to learn those details?
Well, there's many parts to that answer. The first part is that I tend to write, just as a writer, because I write so much from the perspective of character, I tend to live inside every moment of them. And so a lot of times a season that I work on, while it covers 10 episodes, will actually in real time cover 3 weeks, because I tend to compress a story because I'm tracking nuanced emotion. So that's the first part, is like I literally could not imagine not starting right after that happened. So the first incarnation of season 2 did start right after that news. And it was very much about the continuation and the fallout of what had happened, and about people trying to find their footing in the goal of making a better world and workplace. So anyways, then, we wrote that. COVID comes, shut down. Then people are asking, we need to incorporate COVID. And I really resisted it for a little while. But it is we're writing about a news show. So it's pretty tough to ignore a pandemic. So then we went back in and started incorporating that, but it became I wanted to kind of, again, because of the way I write, I wanted to compress the time to tell the story of leading to quarantine. So I started in December 31st. So it was like 3 months. So then I was missing 6 months from the end of the previous episode. And so then we got the idea to tell things sort of as we go and do flashbacks and things like that of what had actually transpired. Sorry, that was a long answer, but that is the true answer.
Oh, that was a wonderful answer. And I love the description of how you really step into the psyche of each character. And particularly for an ensemble show like this, I think that speaks to why every single action has such a ripple effect. So, if we take the episode following Mitch's death, something like that, or even Juliana Margulies coming into the show with her character Lara, and the impact that has, it's not just about the impact that has on Alex and Bradley, but how does that impact everybody else working on the show? And it always feels like every single action has about 10 different reactions to it. And so is that really where a lot of that journey comes from, in the fact that we do always get to explore how it impacts every single character in the ensemble of the show?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, just even taking a step back, that really is how my brain works. I think I just grew up in a house where I was observing a lot going on all the time. And I think I just have like a neural path that will walk in a room and just feel all these like things that are connected between people, and this person wants that, and this person isn't paying attention, and it's like it's how I observe life. So I think that's just where I write from.
And when it came to building the writers' room for the show, I thought it was really great that you've spoken about meeting with writers, and that actually the collaborative element being more important than having a perfect writing sample, and also looking at different people's strengths. You can have a writer who's really sharp with dialogue, someone else who really focuses on narrative arc really well. And so how did those two elements of both thinking about the in-person collaboration with writers and also strengths that complemented each other really end up shaping the writers' room that you've ended up with on this show?
I mean, really just exactly how you described. I think first and foremost, I do want people that are easy to talk to, that are enthusiastic, obviously, about the idea and the show, and that have a feeling for the world of it. And then you put together people who, and you don't always know who's going to be good at certain things, even if that's their genre or whatever. You never know. Like, you get surprised in a writer's room all the time. But ideally, it starts working as a unit, and everybody starts to know everybody's strengths. And so it's really a beautiful thing. I mean, a good writer's room is a very happy place, very fun place.
And when you came onto the show in the first season, there was actually very little time between when you came on as executive producer and showrunner and when you went into production.
Yeah.
And so having a little bit more lead up time and a little bit more time to kind of go through all your processes, what were some of the ways in which you've worked differently on season 2 as a result of having that time, but also the reflection of season 1, and even down to now you've seen all the cast inhabit these characters, you've seen the places they can take them, so it really opens up a lot of possibilities with that as well.
Yes. The first part of the question was about how quickly we had to get season 1 together influence season 2.
Yeah, in having more time for season 2.
It's funny because at the beginning of season 2, I thought we were going to have more time. And then with the pandemic, then I didn't know how much. Then it was like we're starting all over, and I had no idea how much time we were having, because we thought naively we would start filming in June or July of 2020. So, which was not going to happen. So honestly, the whole thing has been kind of like at a runaway train pace. It just because of the way the world was during season 2.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting in watching the character dynamics is there is a lot of antagonism between all of these characters, obviously. And if we take Alex and Chip as an example, the things they're able to say to each other and the depths that they can go with the way that they almost insult each other and call each other out on things works because it is rooted in love and admiration for one another and this reliance that they have with each other. And so there's a way that you've kind of described all the characters as being a little bit of an asshole, but also likable as well. And they also have that emotion, things do come from a place of love and likability in the interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah.
Is it always easy for you to feel out how far they can take the antagonism because of that and where they need to be able to pull back?
Well, easy, no, but I do feel like when I'm writing, I have to be able to inhabit the character and understanding their psychology, justify what they're doing. If I can't justify it, and then I start thinking, oh, they're an asshole, then I'll try to go back and ground it more, or adjust it, because I really do want to give every character, I want to be fair to them. They're even the bad, the good and bad. It's like, that's kind of the nature of this show. It's the nature of the last show I did too, which was Bates Motel. I want to, I'm not interested in writing something where I'm just like, oh, this is a bad person and I hate them and they're just there for everyone to hate on. That's just not in my makeup.
Yeah. And you're bringing up Bates Motel there, which was actually the first time that you were taking on a showrunner role. And what were some of the learning curves in stepping into that position for the first time, and some of the things that you've carried over into how you're working as a showrunner on the morning show?
Well, I was a co-showrunner on Bates Motel with Carlton Cuse, who I love dearly. And he was about the best guide and teacher for producing that I, could have asked to co-run a show with. So, I learned so much. You learn so much just by doing. And there were so many different things. I mean, it's like a novel. I can't even begin, but I will say that the main thing that I took away from Bates Motel as a showrunner is the necessity of constant creative communication. And that is a constant, and it's sometimes a challenge for me because I'm very a very typical writer's personality. I really don't talk much unless I have to. And so the constant interacting with the art department, the director, the actors, the constantly saying, this is what the vision is, this is what the vision is, shift it this way, da, da, da. That to me is the biggest job. And then also having to make hard decisions sometimes is no fun.
I can only imagine. And jumping back to characters on the morning show, one of the things that adds a lot of texture and layers is also that there's always such a dance between what a character believes the truth to be and what the truth actually is in
Yeah,
reality. You know, Mitch is obviously the most prime example
yeah,
where he didn't believe any of his actions to be true, but they
yeah,
obviously were. But it
yeah,
feeds through into all of them. You know, if we look
yeah,
at when Bradley interviewed Hannah and she felt like she was doing it for Hannah, but it was also self-serving.
yeah,
You know, Billy Crudup's character in running the network, the way that he runs the network, again, it's coming back to self-serving, it's coming back to budgets. And so
right,
there's always that really interesting dance between those two spaces. And
yeah.
again, does that go back to the way that you inhabit the psyche and really always making sure that you're writing to those two different versions of truth?
Yes, that also is something I'm obsessed with, is the lies we tell ourselves about who we are and how awesome we are and how good we are. And I do this to myself. It's not like I'm like got a light shining on someone else. I do this to myself all the time. But I think and Instagram really is the classic example of the extreme of it, right? Um I, I always want to have an Instagram day where everyone just says the worst shit about themselves for one day and posts the most unattractive photo. Um, but I think for whatever reason, that is a big theme that runs through me, is that the harsh way to say it is that people are full of shit. And the kind way to say it is that we all need to believe we are good, we are successful, we have good relationships. It's like we need to believe that. And that in a way is very touching when you think about it, because it comes from such a place of vulnerability. Because probably most people don't feel that, I mean, I don't feel it all the time. It's like, I think that's just the human nature. So to me, that's a very tender balance. And I also think it's a very humorous thing that people do, which is to puff themselves up
Yeah.
in
And
their own
it's
head.
interesting when we look at it in terms of Mitch and his journey into understanding and accepting that his actions were what other people were saying, and
Mm-hmm.
almost to have him continue on the show into season 2, it felt like a necessity for him to have some sort of journey. And yet you also never excused his behavior and pushed it over into a place
Mm-hmm.
of sympathy and empathy towards
Mm-hmm.
him. You know, it was like, these are the repercussions and this is what it's like when your family leave you
Mm-hmm.
and people don't want to be associated with you because of this.
Yeah.
And was that line always clear of how to create humanity without empathy, or was it
It
there was
was
a real
it
delicacy to
was
writing it?
tricky, and it was a lot of trial and error and pulling back or pushing forward because I was trying too hard to not, make him sympathetic. And I feel like, again, it's just getting inside the character. And, there were choices to make with that character. Either he's still in denial, he doesn't think he did anything bad, or he thinks he did bad things, but he's like, people should be over it. Or the choice I made, which is that he acknowledged he did really shitty stuff and he could not get past it inside of himself. It really was a story about that. It was not in any way meant to exonerate things he did. It was just the journey of that person in exile, basically.
Yeah.
And it did very, very importantly tie back into Alex and her journey since the pilot, when he was fired. When the ground kind of opened under her and everything she knew changed. So it felt like it was necessary for the next season to really follow through on the truths of the first season for the psychology of the characters.
Yeah, and with the fact you're touching upon Alex there, it's been really interesting to watch the emotional arc that she has with him, where she completely acknowledges and thinks that his behavior is abhorrent, and yet at the same time there is still that gut emotional feeling that's always existed within her that keeps pulling her back into his orbit, even as she's trying to pull away constantly. And was it important to you to really explore what that relationship dynamic looks like when someone is both of those things to somebody?
It was. I think that people are complicated, and we can love people who have done bad things, even though because it's very hard to see people in a whole picture. A lot of times in relationships, we compartmentalize people, and we're like, oh, that's a good person, that's a nice person because they're nice to me. And, however that works. But I feel like it's complicated, and she knew him for so many years before these were acknowledged as bad things to do. Even in their world, they were not acknowledged as bad things to do, as was true in the industry. It was just, sexual harassment happened. People didn't call it harassment then, but it was. So it's an evolution of a society. It's a woman who was a partner with this guy for 15 years. She realized all the stuff he was doing. They got in a horrible place, but there's a part of her that still remembers him as her partner of 15 years, who was the person she was closest to. So it's like a fight within herself where she wants to reject him, but she also feels guilty. And she has some roots with him, It was complicated. It was hard to write. And I know there's a lot of reactions to it, which I understand.
And speaking of choices, when it came to writing the circumstances of Mitch's death, it's not actually just that him driving off the road is a clear internal journey for his character in the way that he ends. But there's also the added layer of the fact that people don't know that he drove himself off the road, and they're not necessarily aware of that and what the response of that is. Was it always clear to you that those two details were going to be the choice, or did you play around with different directions of how you wanted to take him out of the show?
Yeah. There were some different scenarios. We filmed it both ways, where it was a conscious choice and a not conscious choice. In the script, it's actually written as more random because he's distracted, he's not paying attention, it's late at night, he's upset. And that was the direction that Steve had pitched it, and Mimi felt strongly about it. And it makes perfect sense, given that he has not wanted to let in the worst of himself into his brain. And with the thing coming out about targeting Black women, it's just so horrible. And I think when he lets it in, he doesn't want to live with himself.
And when it comes to the relationship dynamic between Alex and Bradley, what's really interesting is that when you take a step back, these are two characters that have been through very traumatic, in-depth experiences with each other, but actually haven't spent very much time together. I think there was an episode in this season that mentioned they only worked together for 3 months, which isn't a lot of time, even though there has been that real intricacy between them. And so how does that for you really shape an interesting space in the dynamic that you're able to consistently write between these two characters, where there's both like a real intimacy to them, but still that distance and still that journey of them getting to know each other and being in that dance of not fully trusting and being each other's confidence, despite the fact they've been through all of this?
Yeah, I think because when you go through very traumatic experiences with someone, even if you don't know them, there's like a very deep connection with you, the two of you. If if you get in a pulled out at sea in a riptide and you can't get back and you're with a stranger, you will always, in some part of you, feel really connected to that person. And I feel like the beginning of their relationship was built on trauma. And I don't think they know each other very well. And that was always the conceit, was that it wasn't going to be like, oh, the buddy show or the enemy show. It was going to be two smart career women circling each other, figuring it out, having ups and downs, having, connections and disconnections. So I feel like they're, in their own way. Well, Alex is very guarded. Bradley is guarded because she has a lot of pride. And I think if she feels like she's getting rejected ever, she'll just like, but I think the combination of both of them, they both long for connection. And sometimes they achieve it. But there's a lot distracting them. There's a lot going on in their lives. It is a competitive business. Competition is also not bad. I mean, like to tell women, oh, it's bad to be competitive with another woman is insane. Like, we're in a business that's competitive. You don't tell that to men. have you ever, I mean, it's like tying someone's, I can't even think of it, but it's like, it's a complete handicap to tell a person in a race, you cannot run as fast as you can because you have to be this thing. And so I feel like I like the stories where they're competitive. I don't think it's about pitting women against each other. I think it's about being a human, being in a business, and trying to achieve what your goals are, and being a human along the way, which means dealing with other humans and trying to figure out the best way to do that, in a moral way.
Yeah. And with Bradley in particular, you've always written her in a way where her hometown and her family have been such influential parts of who she is as a character. But there's even more layers and textures added this season, and particularly with the choice to bring her brother back in the way that you did, and what that really brings up for her. And even as she explores her sexuality, how where she comes from really influences a lot of the choices and actions that she makes. So did you feel like by kind of reintroducing her brother in particular to focus on a lot of her upbringing again, really allowed you to take her to a much deeper level as a result of that?
Yes, that was always, to me, the basis of her character was her family, and the way she had compromised her own desires by always worrying and taking care of them, and that felt like a coming of age story that can happen at any age, and I think bringing that into center focus was really an important story to me, because that's a real dilemma. And it's funny, people look at that and they're like, oh, she's so awful for abandoning her brother. And then other people are like, it's like everybody has such a different opinion about it. But the truth is, if someone with an abuse issue, I mean, a drug abuse, is abusing alcohol or whatever issue is in your life, and they cannot make it work, they are going to consume you. So at a certain point, you're either going to sacrifice yourself on that altar, or you're going to have to leave them. And they're both horrible choices. But it's a very real thing for a lot of people in the world, and a lot of young people who have parents who have addiction problems. So I really just wanted to show the depth of that and how it played on her in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the tone that you found for the season finale and season 2 against season
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
because season one finale was very much about building those dramatic beats, you know, building those open-ended threads to come into the second season. And what's interesting is as we veer closer towards the end of season two, it goes to a real place of introspection, both tonally for the show as a whole, but also for each of the characters in different ways. And so when did you realize that that was the type of tone and journey that you wanted to take us on as we go towards the end of the season?
It really had to do with combining it with COVID, because the hugeness of COVID, you cannot top in a story. So it felt like it either felt fake to try to do something, you know, explosive. It felt like the most honest thing is that what COVID brought, aside from mayhem and destruction, was a lot of introspection. A lot of people looking at themselves, a lot of people looking at their lives because they, for one thing, had time to look all of a sudden. I don't think it's a coincidence that the whole social revolution happened during quarantine. You know, I think it's very, very related to that, and I really wanted I wanted Alex to feel the weight of what she had done wrong, and to kind of accept it and stop beating herself up and say, I'm gonna keep going and I'm gonna be a better person. And that, to me, even though it's not fireworks in the sky, to me, that's the biggest fireworks you can have as a human. And I think it is hugely powerful. And I think it's a closing of a circle for her that started in the pilot of the first season, when she was trying to escape. She was trying to escape blame. She was trying to, like, you know, maneuver her way so she wouldn't get caught in the mess. And she finally gets completely caught in the mess. She gets basically canceled. Everyone is mad at her except Chip, because they're like, you know, they're like an old married couple. But that's what she gets to. And I think that's a really strong, exciting place to get to for a character.
Yeah. Well, it's been really interesting to watch where you've taken all of these characters in the second season and the complexities that you always write to with your characters. Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Kerry. Really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure.